She was the sheriff's daughter, he was an outlaw. But one night by the river, they let their hearts speak. Dusk settled over the Wyoming frontier, the sky painted in bruised purple and silver. The Moonwater River, winding quiet and wide through the brush and stone, shimmered with a pale sheen that mirrored the stars not yet risen. Lena Whitlock rode along its familiar bank, her boots steady in the stirrups, reins loose in her calloused hands. She came here often, not as her father ordered, but to escape him. The Moonwater had been her place long before the badge ever mattered, before law and duty defined her, before her mother's blood had dried on their kitchen floor. As a child, she used to wade its edges and catch fireflies. Now, 25, she watched the water like it might carry her away. Her horse snorted and halted. Lena's gaze dropped. Blood. A smear, fresh and dark, streaked across a patch of flattened grass. Instinct drew her hand to the colt at her hip. Slowly, she dismounted, crouching beside the stain, tracing the trail that led into the trees. She followed it in silence. A few paces more, near the river's bend where the brush grew thick and wild, she saw him. A man, collapsed on his side, body curled slightly, arm clutched tight against a torn and bloodied shoulder. His shirt was soaked through, a mess of red and dust. His breath was shallow, fogging in the cooling air. Lena raised her gun, finger tight on the trigger. Then, her eyes found his face. Cass Hale. Wanted poster-level famous. Accused of robbing the Shelby Bank, of murdering 2 guards, of setting fire to a homestead in Eldridge. Sheriff Isaac Whitlock, her father, had sworn to bring him in dead or alive. There was a bounty so high, it made honest men twitchy, and desperate men worse. He turned his head slowly, as if every movement cost him. "If you're gonna shoot," he rasped, voice cracked and low, "just make it quick." She didn't lower the gun, not yet. The outlaw didn't reach for a weapon, didn't move to run. He only shifted, weakly, and placed his uninjured hand over his bleeding shoulder, as if to hide the damage from her view. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't pride, it was dignity. A final shred he didn't want stripped away, even now. And, for a moment, just one, Lena saw something behind those gray, hollowed eyes. Something that wasn't guilt, something that reminded her of her mother. The last night she was alive, the fear, the pain, the way she had looked at Lena and said, "Don't be afraid to feel." Lena lowered her gun, just a hair. He blinked, surprised. "You're Cass Hale," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside her. He nodded once, the motion barely visible. She stared at him, at the outlaw, at the bleeding man, at someone the world called a monster, and yet who lay there, too broken to even defend himself. No posse, no badge, just her. "I will help you," she whispered, more to herself than to him, "just this once." With practiced care, she slid her pistol back into its holster, knelt beside him, and reached for his good arm. He didn't resist. He couldn't. It took every ounce of strength she had to haul him upright, to get him across her horse. She draped his torso forward, took the reins, and swung herself behind him, steadying his weight. The ride was slow, the moon rising behind the ridge. She guided them not back to town, not to the jailhouse, not to her father's justice, but into the hills, to a forgotten path that curved between the pines, a trail only she knew, to a cabin, small, silent, hidden, once her mother's hunting shelter, now abandoned but untouched. It smelled like pine and dust and memory. She eased Cass down onto the cot, built a fire, and lit the single oil lamp on the windowsill. Then she stood back, watching the shadows dance across his face. Sheriff's daughter, outlaw, and between them, the river, the moon, and something neither of them could yet name. Moonwater cabin, late evening. The fire cracked low, casting long shadows along the wooden walls. Lena sat cross-legged near the hearth, pressing a cloth into the basin of warmed water, watching it darken with blood and grit. Cass lay nearby on a cot, still, pale, sweat clinging to his brow. The faint rise and fall of his chest was the only proof he remained conscious. Then, a rough breath escaped his lips. She turned sharply, heart quickening. His eyelids fluttered. Groaning softly, he shifted. His right hand jerked to his shoulder before he winced and dropped it. "You're safe," Lena said, voice flat but calm. "For now." Cass blinked, slowly focusing on her face. "Where?" "Well, my mother's cabin," she replied. "No one knows it's still here." He tried to sit up, failed. "You should have left me." "I almost did." A beat of silence. He looked at her, his eyes wary, guarded. "Why didn't you?" Lena didn't answer. She wrung out the cloth and leaned forward again, dabbing gently at the angry gash along his shoulder. He winced but didn't pull away. "I've had worse," he murmured, more to himself. She glanced down at the blood-streaked water. "That is not something to be proud of." Another silence, heavier this time. Only the fire filled the gap between their words. Cass's gaze wandered, settling on the dusty corner of the room where a faded hunting satchel hung from a nail. Beneath it, folded neatly, was a small square of linen, a scarf, worn and frayed. He reached for it without thinking, but paused before touching it. Instead, with surprising gentleness, he nudged it straight with the back of 2 fingers, placing it back as if afraid to disturb a ghost. "This place meant something," he said quietly. "I can feel it." Lena froze, the cloth halfway to the basin. Her breath caught. Her mother had worn that scarf the last winter they ever spent together. No one had stepped inside this cabin since. She cleared her throat. "It did." Cass looked at her then, really looked. There was no outlaw in his eyes, just weariness. And something else. Respect, maybe. Lena stood abruptly, walking to the table where she busied herself with her mother's old herb pouch. Her fingers shook slightly as she opened it. "I'm supposed to believe you're not dangerous?" she asked, without turning around. "You should not," he said. She turned, caught off guard by the honesty. "I've done things," Cass continued. "Things I regret, but not the one they say. I did not rob that bank. I did not shoot those men." Lena searched his face. "You expect me to believe that? You're Cass Hale." "I am. And I am not the man on those posters." Lena's mind whirled. Her father had spent years chasing outlaws like Cass. Men who ran, lied, stole. She had helped him. Tracked men through snow, brought them in, watched them hang. But this one spoke like he'd lost more than he ever stole. Before she could speak, a distant sound sliced through the night. Hooves, more than one, approaching fast. Lena's spine stiffened. She darted to the small window, parting the curtain, a sliver. Torchlight flickered between the trees. "Get down," she hissed. Cass groaned as he rolled from the cot. She grabbed the extra blanket from the footlocker, covered him quickly, and shoved his bag beneath the bed. A knock at the door, then a voice she knew by heart. "Lena, you in there?" Her father. She opened the door halfway, stepping out into the cold. Sheriff Whitlock stood tall, 2 deputies behind him, his eyes sharp, scanning the dark trees. "We found blood by the river," he said. "Tracks headed north." Lena steadied herself. "I saw them, but they turned west, toward the ridge. I followed for a while, lost the trail." Her father narrowed his eyes. "You sure?" "I am." He studied her face. "You all right?" She nodded, just cold. Sheriff Whitlock lingered a moment, then turned to his men. "Let's keep moving." When they were gone, Lena stepped back inside, closing the door quietly behind her. Cass was still, hidden beneath the blanket. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Thank you," came his voice, muffled. Lena said nothing, but in the silence that followed, something settled between them. Not trust, not yet, but something that felt like it could grow into it. The morning came sharp and pale, the kind that never quite shook the chill. Lena stood outside the cabin, boots planted in frost-bitten earth, her breath curling in front of her face like smoke. Inside, Cass lay quiet beneath the blanket, every breath shallow but steadier than the night before. The river hummed somewhere in the distance, faint beneath the whisper of wind in the pines. From the tree line, hooves broke the silence. She turned quickly, just as her father rode into view, flanked by 2 deputies. Sheriff Isaac Whitlock dismounted before his horse had even stilled, scanning the earth with the intensity that had made him both feared and respected. His eyes, always precise, fixed on the ground beside the river where a dark streak of frozen blood trailed off into the brush. Lena's heart seized in her chest. Her hand dropped instinctively to the revolver at her side. She didn't touch it, only needed the weight. The sheriff crouched beside the smear. His fingers brushed the edge of the blood. Then he looked up. Someone's bleeding. The trail leads that way. His gaze turned toward the exact direction of the hidden cabin. Lena stepped forward, tone even. Could be an animal, wounded and wandered. He shook his head. That's no animal trail. There's weight here. Drag marks. Her throat dried. Then whoever it was, they're long gone now. I rode past this way. There was nothing. You rode past, did you? He asked, eyes narrowing. I did. His eyes lingered on hers longer than they should have. Then, slowly, he straightened, dusting his gloves. Cass Hale's been spotted on this side of the county line, he said. Took a bullet, by all accounts. Her stomach clenched. If he's hiding, someone's helping him, the sheriff continued. A man like that doesn't survive alone in the wild, not injured. Lena forced her voice steady. If I see him, I'll ride straight to town. I expect nothing less, he replied. Then, with a slow nod, he turned to his deputies and mounted up. The sound of hooves faded into the woods, leaving Lena standing in brittle silence. Inside the cabin, Cass was already sitting up, pale and straining to breathe, but his eyes were sharp. He had heard every word. You risked your freedom, he said quietly, for a stranger. Lena said nothing at first. She poured water from the kettle into a tin cup and handed it to him. You do not look like a stranger, she murmured. Cass stared at the cup for a moment before taking it with his good hand. He drank, then set it down with care. I was not always like this, he said finally. She sat across from him, waiting. My father was a preacher, he said. Good man, too good for this world. He believed in redemption for all men, no matter how far they'd fallen. When I was 20, someone set our house on fire. They called it an accident. It was not. He paused, his eyes clouded. I got out. They didn't. Lena felt the words hit her like stones dropped into still water. Cass continued. Weeks later, a bank was robbed in Dry Bluff. Witnesses claimed they saw me there. I was already 3 towns away, but no one wanted to listen. Especially not your father. Her brow furrowed. There was one man, Cass said, voice tightening. Dalton Briggs. He worked under your father back then. Investigated the arson. Quietly closed it. Then he testified against me in the robbery trial. Lena's stomach turned. The name was familiar. She had seen it in her father's reports when she was younger. I have been running ever since, Cass said. Lena stared at him. What she saw now was not a fugitive, not the man her father had described. This man was worn down, but not broken, accused, but not lost. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you did not leave me by the river, he answered. Lena lowered her eyes. The fire crackled softly between them, and in its warmth something shifted. Not quite trust, but something close, something real. Cass's boots sank into the wet earth as he limped toward the river's edge. The air was thick with fog and moonlight, silver stretching in ribbons across the moonwater. His breath was tight in his chest. Behind him, Lena followed, her hand near her revolver, eyes sweeping the trees. You should not be here, Cass said without turning. If they find you with me, I made my choice the moment I pulled you out of that river, she answered. He turned to look at her, a flicker of something behind his pain. You should not have to carry this. I already am. They reached the riverbank. Cass crouched, one hand braced against his knee. Lena glanced over her shoulder. Too quiet, she murmured. Cass looked up. The shot came sharp and sudden. A bullet struck the tree inches from Lena's head. She ducked instinctively, rolling behind a boulder. Cass dropped to the ground. His body ached, but he reached for the pistol at his belt, empty. He had not reloaded since the night he was shot. A shadow moved in the trees. Well, hell, came a voice, rough, half laughing. Thought I might find you here, Hale. You always did like rivers. Cass squinted through the haze. The man stepped forward, rifle slung lazy across his chest, beard streaked with gray, eyes that held too much pleasure in the moment. Briggs sent me, the man said. Said if I found you, I'd be doing him a kindness. Told me you were sniffing too close to truth again. Cass's lips tightened. Lena, from her spot, heard everything. You talk too much, Cass rasped. Old habits, the man chuckled, raising his rifle. Now hold still. I like clean shots. He aimed, the click of a safety. Then another sound, a sharp crack. Lena fired first. The man screamed as the bullet hit his arm, sending the rifle spinning into the dirt. He stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, snarling curses. Cass stared in disbelief. Lena stood now, gun still aimed, breathing hard. You chose me, he said, stunned. Why? Her voice trembled but did not break. I do not know, but I could not let you die. The outlaw groaned, dragging himself toward cover. Lena moved forward. Do not, she warned. He froze. Cass stood slowly, grimacing from the pain in his leg, then walked over to where the man's rifle lay. He kicked it farther away with the toe of his boot, then looked to Lena. Thank you, he said, voice thick. She did not speak. Her eyes were on the trees, alert. Her heart thundered in her chest. We should go, she said. If he has friends. Cass nodded. But as they moved, something had changed between them. She had crossed a line her father had drawn in stone. And yet, as the river rushed beside them, Lena felt no regret, only the quiet certainty that in that moment her heart had spoken first. They found shelter just past the ridge, where the pines grew thicker and the rocks folded in to form a shallow cave. It was nothing more than a hollow in the stone, but it held off the wind, and the small fire Cass built flickered just enough to keep them warm. Lena sat with her back to the wall, her legs pulled close to her chest, her rifle beside her. Cass knelt across from her, wrapping a scrap of cloth around his arm to keep the bandage in place. The silence between them was no longer tense, but tentative, soft, like something not yet spoken but understood. As she dozed briefly, Cass glanced down at her gloves, the leather frayed at the seams. Without a word, he reached into his pack, pulled out a thin strip of deerskin, and began threading it through the tears, mending the weak spots. His fingers moved slow but sure, the kind of patience that spoke of someone used to doing more with less. When she stirred, he placed the gloves beside her. She noticed. You fixed them. He shrugged. You will need them. Cold's coming again. She picked one up, turning it in her hand. Thank you. He said nothing, just leaned back against the wall and stared into the fire. Later, as dusk crept in, Cass pulled a small leather strap from his bag. Your grip, he said, reaching for her hand. The skin on your palm is raw. From the rifle. I can manage. You do not have to. He showed her how to wrap the strap around her palm, how to anchor it across her wrist, so the weight of the gun would not rub the skin raw. His hands were gentle, respectful. When he let go, their fingers touched briefly. An accident, or maybe not. Lena turned away, then reached into her coat and pulled out the last of the bread she had packed days before. It is not much, she said, tearing it in half. Cass looked at her, brows lifting. You sure? It would be a shame to eat it alone. He took the piece she offered and broke it smaller, handing her some back. You are terrible at sharing, she said, smiling faintly. I am still learning. For a long moment, they ate in silence. Outside, snow whispered against the trees. Cass stared into the flames, then spoke, voice low. When I first ran, I thought I could outrun the lies. I thought I just needed time. Then I realized, time does not clear a name, it only buries it deeper. Lena looked at him. And now? He glanced at her, then back to the fire. If someone like you believes me, maybe I am not lost yet. Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. She reached for the gloves he had fixed, slipping them on slowly, her hands now warm in more ways than one. And outside the cave, the wind carried the smell of pine and snow, but inside, it was quiet. A different kind of quiet, like trust being born in the shadows. Wyoming territory, deep forest edge, late dusk. Lena's heart pounded before she even heard the hoofbeats. Distant, slow, purposeful. The low, rhythmic thud against leaf-littered earth sounded like doom itself. She froze, listening. Cass, lying on his pallet of blankets, winced as the distant noise carried through the cave's entrance. Outside, the forest hush broke. A voice barked her name. Lena Whitlock, step outside with your hands where we can see them. The tone was hard, merciless. Lena's fingers went cold. She rose silently, drawing the frayed cloak tight around her shoulders even though the chill was not the worst of it. Cass stirred, eyes widening with fear. She shook her head. Stay down, she whispered. At the cave mouth stood her father, Sheriff Isaac Whitlock, framed by torchlight, and two deputies at his side, his coat dusted with cold ash and pine needles. His eyes were ice when they fell on Cass's bag lying against a rock, and then on Lena. I gave you one chance, girl, he said, voice hard. Outlaw Cass Hale was spotted bleeding near Moonwater. Tracks lead right here. Lena swallowed. The badge on her hip felt suddenly heavy. Behind her father, the deputies scanned the trees. Lena lifted her hands slowly, breath shallow. You won't find anyone else here, sir. His gaze flicked to the cave floor, where faint blood spatters stained the stone. His face tightened. Don't lie to me, not this time. The deputy nodded, one hand on his rifle. Sheriff Whitlock's boots crunched across dead leaves. Cass stirred again, weak but aware. With a sudden surge of pain, he tried to rise. One deputy stepped forward. On your feet, Hale. Lena's knees threatened to buckle. She scrambled forward, placing herself between the deputies and Cass. Sheriff, he's wounded. He needs help. Her father's eyes narrowed, confusion and anger warring. He needs jail, he motioned. Bind him. Cass didn't resist. He rose unsteadily, hands raised. Lena's vision blurred with heat, her heart twisting. She remembered her mother's pale face. The night the killers came, the law that punished without mercy. You don't have to do this, she cried. You don't have to drag him like a hog to justice. Sheriff Whitlock hesitated. The forest was silent. A single snowflake drifted down, unlikely in this season, but real enough. Lena, he said softly, but cold. You ride with me or stay here. Either way, the law runs. She looked at Cass's face, pale but calm, pain etched but eyes alive. Then at the badge she wore proudly all her life. I'm riding with you, she said, voice steady, but full of iron. Cass's shoulder sagged. He didn't speak. She didn't dare look at him again. They mounted in grim silence. The torch flames danced on cold faces. Sheriff Whitlock's eyes never left the path ahead. Lena's horse stumbled once under Cass's weight. She glanced back. Cass's jaw clenched, but he gave her a nod, a quiet, grateful nod. That night, the ride back to town was harsh and cold. Snow began to slush, fog crawling across forest floor. Cass sat between two guards, wrists bound. Lena rode beside them, rigid. No one spoke. The only sound was hoofbeats, in wet snow and wind, whispering through bare branches. At the jailhouse door, Sheriff Whitlock looked back at Lena. "You made your choice." Her eyes were steady. "I made the only choice I could." Cass's head turned toward her. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He said softly, nearly to himself, "Thank you, Lena." Lena swallowed. She didn't answer. The door slammed, locks clicked, chains rattled. Cass was gone. Lena remained by the torchlight, rain-soaked and frozen, her heart splitting open with a kind of grief she'd never known. The badge on her belt felt heavier than lead. Her father's silhouette receded into night, dark, unyielding, resolute. She raised her gaze to the sky, where stars blinked cold over frozen earth. Moonwater River flowed somewhere beyond forest and snow, silent tonight. The memory of his wounded form, his pale eyes, the cave's candle glow, it all thundered within her chest. Under that empty sky, Lena whispered to the wind, more to herself than to anyone, "I did what I had to do." But inside, she knew, she had already made another promise, one that didn't belong to law or duty, one that belonged to the heart. Snow lay heavy on the ground when Lena crept toward the abandoned storage shed behind the old bank building. Her boots crunched against frost-hardened earth, and every breath she exhaled puffed white in the night air. In her coat pocket she carried the crumpled ledger, stained with water and age, and a folded note signed, "Dalton Briggs." Tinfoil under moonlight proved more dangerous than horseshoes at dawn, but this was all they had. The door gave way with a soft groan. She slipped inside, heart pounding. Cass lay huddled in the corner, wrists bruised from rough rope. When torchlight flared, he looked up, raw hope in his eyes. This is it," Lena said, spreading the ledger on a dusty crate. She traced a name, a date, a forgery. Cass swallowed. His voice was thin. "My parents' home, Briggs burned it. He stole their names, then mine." Smoke curled in the corner as Lena stood, resolve set. She pulled free the guard chief's keys, pinched earlier, and snapped the cuffs loose. Cass rubbed his wrists, grimacing. Inside him stirred a grim strength. "Come with me," she whispered. He nodded, silent. They slipped through the night, hidden behind horse stalls and forgotten barns. At the stable door, Lena paused, fingers trembling over the latch. Inside the wooden stalls, horses stamped their hooves, mist rising from their flanks. She urged one mare forward, led Cass to the saddle. With a careful lift, she helped him mount in front of her. Their escape hoofbeats were soft. Moonlight traced silver paths across the fields as they galloped toward the forest. They were nearly safe when the rifle shot split the night. The mare shied. Lena yanked the reins. They crashed into the undergrowth. Leather and wood cracked under hoof and trunk, and then silence. Cass rolled first, breath roaring in his ears. Lena yanked pistol free, knees pressed against wet pine needles. Ahead, a man stepped out, tall, gaunt, rifle-trained, torch strapped to a tree trunk behind him. "Briggs sends his regards," the man sneered. He said, "Bodies like yours don't speak." A single moment, the man crouched, aimed. Lena fired. The report crackled. The rifle whipped sideways. The shooter screamed, clutching a shattered arm. From the darkness, a figure stumbled. Cass dragged himself out, pain raging from a shoulder wound, but steady. He lunged, fists flying, boots sliding in mud. Dirt kicked, branches snapped. The man collapsed. A second rifle barked a cadence. Lena pivoted at the sound, squeezing the trigger again. The guard slumped, rifle dropping. Silence settled, cold and heavy. Cass dropped to one knee, breathing ragged. "Did we finish it?" he wheezed. Lena nodded, eyes cold but alive. Around them lay broken weapons, twisted metal, and truth. Dawn found them standing at the forest's edge. A rider approached, torch bobbing against the pale light. Sheriff Isaac Whitlock emerged first, deputies behind. Lena held the ledger aloft. "These papers, they prove Cass Hale was framed." She laid the notes, the forged signature, the deed. The sheriff's stern face cracked when he recognized his own deputy's scrawl, Briggs's name. Cass stepped forward, shoulders slumped but unbound. "I did not rob any bank. I am innocent." A long silence. The water of Moonwater gurgled quietly nearby. Sheriff Whitlock's jaw clenched, then slackened. The deputies lowered rifles. "You're free," the sheriff said, voice low. Cass exhaled, rubbing tired eyes. He turned to Lena. The morning light cast long shadows. He reached for her hand, slow, tentative. She didn't pull away. The river glinted behind them, cold and honest. They walked forward together, footprints side by side in the faint new snow. No cheers, but a quiet peace, hard-earned and fragile. The ledger folded in Lena's satchel, but something greater remained out in the open: truth, survival, and a chance neither had thought they'd ever have. The sun had set behind the hills, casting long shadows across Dry Bluff. The air was crisp, and the town, once filled with whispers and judgment, now watched in uncertain silence as Cass Hale walked freely through its streets. For the first time in years, he was no longer hunted, no longer running. Eyes followed him as he passed, some with suspicion, others with quiet respect. No one spoke, but something had shifted. The sheriff's badge still gleamed on Isaac Whitlock's chest, but even he stood still now, as if unsure of the lines between law and justice. "I was wrong," Sheriff Whitlock said quietly as Cass approached the edge of town. "I see that now." Cass met his gaze. "Took a bullet and the truth to prove it, I guess." The sheriff didn't smile, but he nodded. Once, it was enough. That night, as frost crept across the meadows and the Moonwater River shimmered beneath a silver sky, Lena stood alone by the bank where everything had begun. She heard the quiet steps before she saw him. Cass emerged from the tree line, his coat dusted with the last of the trail's chill. His eyes found hers in the low light, and he stopped a few paces away. Neither spoke at first. The river gurgled softly, the same lullaby it had sung on the night she first found him bleeding and broken. Cass took a step closer. His voice was low, careful. "If you walk this river with me, I will never run again." Lena didn't answer immediately. She looked past him, to the path he'd walked, to the path they might yet walk together. Then, slowly, she reached out, her fingers sliding into his. No rush, no fear, no hesitation. "Then let it begin here," she whispered. They stood like that, hand in hand, without kiss or embrace, just quiet understanding. Cass's hand trembled slightly in hers, not from cold, but from the weight of everything this moment meant. It was enough. The wind picked up along the river's edge, tugging gently at Lena's hair. She didn't move, neither did he. Behind them, Dry Bluff slumbered in winter's hush. Ahead of them, the west waited, vast, untamed, and full of roads not yet taken. Cass glanced at her. "You know," he said, voice warmer now, "I used to think all rivers did was carry things away. And now?" He looked down at their joined hands. "Now I think they sometimes bring things back." Lena smiled, small, real. They turned together, steps crunching softly over frost-covered grass. No one saw them go, but the Moonwater saw. And if rivers had memory, it would remember this night, the outlaw and the sheriff's daughter, choosing something neither had dared before: hope. And they walked on, into the quiet, into whatever would come next, hand in hand. And that's how a wanted outlaw and a sheriff's daughter found something wilder than the West itself: grace, forgiveness, and a love that refused to follow the rules. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you believe that even on the roughest roads, hearts can still find their way home, go ahead and hit that hype button. Let us know you're riding with us. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales where bullets fly, hearts beat louder, and love always leaves an echo. Until next time, partners, ride steady, and ride true.